exciting PC Voyage. I'm Rainey Laviolette.
And I'm Diana McLean. Today we're going to be talking with John Fleury about computer viruses.
That's right. John's a well-known expert in this field, and thank you for coming in.
Okay, you're welcome. Before we actually start on discussing what computer viruses are, I'd like to tell you about what computer viruses are not. You know, a lot of people have problems with their computers and they blame them on viruses, and they go running and they purchase software. Well, they don't necessarily need to. In many cases, you should check out your computer before you go running out and screaming virus. The other thing is there are many kinds of malicious type of software that people will run into. And only a fraction of them are actually classified as a computer virus. For instance, there's in 1988, the Internet system, which is a network-driven system, there was a worm introduced by Richard Morris in 1988. And actually, what this program did was to go in and search for passwords. And it brought down 6,000 systems worldwide. That was not a virus. It was a computer worm. Okay, and he got in a lot of trouble for doing that. Actually,
is he out of jail yet?
Actually, there was serious problems. But his father was head of security, national security, so there was a interesting situation there. But again, that was a worm. That was a computer worm, not a virus. Another type of malicious software is a logic bomb. That's where somebody may be getting a pink slip and getting ready to be unemployed, and will put some timer, some timing device inside of a program that after that person's left will bring that system down. That's not a virus. That's just referred to as a logic bomb. Still very malicious in nature and can cause a lot of problems. The other type is what's referred to as a Trojan horse. And what this is essentially a program that's allowed into the PC without the user's authorization. And it's code, it's a program. And there was a very popular incident that happened in 1989 called the AIDS information diskette that was put out. There was 20,000 copies of this diskette program mailed around the world to educational facilities, medical institutions.
User groups.
Yeah, user groups, a lot of people, individuals. And essentially, there was a message that was put up by this programmer saying pay $189, varying from $189 to $389 for the information on this diskette. And if you didn't, it would go ahead and damage the hard disk. So again, that was not a virus. That was referred to as a Trojan horse. Computer viruses essentially are programs that replicate, that self-replicate. There's an engine inside of there's code inside of the virus that will replicate when an activity occurs, and that is the thing that makes that particular program a virus. You know, there's a lot of malicious software out there, but that is the one thing.
Of that?
There's all kinds of examples. Right now there are 2,800 known viruses, and many of these are again classified as pure viruses. There's so many out there. The ping pong virus is a boot track virus.
I've seen that
you put
one.
a disk. You know, it's a fun and games. It's not very malicious, but it will slow your system down. And you put the disk inside of the disk drive. You boot the computer, and it will go into memory, and it will spread. Another person comes around, puts a diskette into the disk drive, and that person now has a copy of that, moving it along to all of the other disk drives. And that's the way most of these boot track infectors work. They just go on the boot sector of the diskette. They reside in the computer's memory, waiting to infect another diskette. There's hundreds and hundreds of different variety of boot track viruses. There are file infection viruses. Jerusalem is a good example of that. It attaches to the file itself, and after that the file grows, and it just waits in memory, waiting for the file that's infected to be executed, and at that point attaches to another file, to whatever file it seeks out, and it just replicates that way. It's nasty.
Yes.
I had a friend who he'd written a program or something like that, and he wanted to make sure everybody got it. Well, on that diskette, and every disk in his box was a virus.
Unbelievable.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I caught it because when I get diskettes from anybody, no matter what they are, even vendors, I always scan them to make sure that there is nothing on them.
Right. Absolutely. Knock twice.
Yeah.
Well, you might give them yourself to friends on your own diskettes.
Well, that brings up a good point. How do people get viruses? You know, viruses have been around for a long time. They've made the rounds. There are viruses in what they refer to as in the wild, actually being used and proliferated. There are also research type viruses that are not being exposed yet. There are developers that are putting together viruses that are going to be just used in a test mode. Occasionally they get out. Occasionally they get shared with other educational institutions, with other researchers, and that's how they get out. But in essence, what you have to be careful, what you have to watch when you're dealing with viruses is how they get around. And if you're dealing with bulletin boards, be careful. You can download your software, especially if they're executable files. Virus check them when they get to your workstation. Always virus check them. Pirated software, people love to share games. Neighbors, people at work, always be careful. Basically, you shouldn't do that anyway, because it's just illegal. It's not a good policy. Shareware, there are games, there are software that are legitimate, but they're free until you decide to keep it, and then you can send whatever the coupon states. But those get around, so you got to be real careful. A lot of magazines have diskettes in the magazine itself. Be real careful. There were 4 incidences in the past couple of years that had infections. The Personal Computing magazine had the New Zealand virus in 1990. PC Today had the Disk Killer virus in August 1990. PC World had Cascade in 1990, and a magazine called Soft and Micro had a very dangerous 4K virus in 1991. So they're out there. So be real careful. You're going to get free software, but make sure you virus check it. Absolutely important. PCs at home. If you've got a lot of people using the PCs, make sure there's some education in place for people to use the PCs. Make sure they know how to scan the disks before they insert them. PCs at school. A lot of people take night schools, extracurriculum courses. A lot of people in that situations. Make sure that before you bring your software home, before you bring your software to work, to do printouts or whatever, your homework, that you're virus checking, because it's gonna be moving around. Another thing is, if your computer needs servicing and you have in-home service, a service engineer could walk in, insert their diagnostics disk in a drive, and guess what? You may become infected. They're going to fix your computer's hard disk, but they give you a virus. That's not to say that's going to happen. In many cases, these people know about viruses, and they're going to take the precautions necessary. How else do viruses get in? Shrink-wrap software has been known to be virus infected. Novell, the NetWare Encyclopedia, had the NoInt virus in December of '91. Da Vinci mail systems had Michelangelo. That was a nasty one too, spread worldwide. So there's a lot of ways to get the viruses in, and you just got to take proper precautions.
Where did viruses get started? What is the basic history of a virus?
Well, they've been around for a long time. They've actually, a German mathematician, von Neumann, back in the 1940s, wrote a thesis on how viruses would replicate in the real world, even before computers were around. So the foundation of the virus started many, many, many years ago. A guy named Conway wrote some of the first programs in the 60s, where they had AT&T and Xerox doing what they referred to as the core wars. They were building programs that would eat each other's software. So that's real interesting, and that's 30-something years ago. But they really started in the 1980s in the educational institutions, in the educational environment, where it was a great test case. People were getting involved. They wanted a challenge to they wanted to use a computer in a laboratory, and the professors wanted the students to have a challenge, and they started writing viruses, and not knowing what that they would actually get out or escape, not really knowing what they were, but there was enough code and logic in the programs to make it interesting for the students. So that's essentially where what we know of today as the viruses, where they started. And then the students got real good. And then the students became hackers. And then home PCs came around, and then they shared their programs, and then it just took off from there. Also, at the same time, in the United States, this is a worldwide phenomenon. Same time, there's there were scientists and researchers in Bulgaria, over in the Bloc countries, that were developing very high-level engineered software, and they were working with their counterparts in the United States, their research counterparts in the United States, talking about new types of software that would do new types of activities, and they would end up being viruses as well. That sharing across continents helped to proliferate that to what we know it today as well, and that's still going on. So there's a deep history of viruses. It's been around. They've been around for a long time. They're growing, and they're going to be with us for a long time as well. So there's a lot more to come on that. As far as preventing them, there's many things you can do. You know, there's a lot of common sense things. I think what people need to realize is that if you use just good computing practice, you know, make sure that people in the home, if it's a home computer that they're talking about, know how to do scans, you know, virus scanning of the diskettes. Have the virus software installed. You know, make sure that the virus software is installed. Make sure that it's in use, because it can be there, but nobody will know about it. Make sure that it's in use. And one of the common sense things, too, is if you've got a PC, what if the hard disk goes down and the boot track gets wiped out? What you want to do, prepare for that and create an emergency disk. Put some files on that diskette that are used for basic startup. Your autoexec, your config sys, maybe some important startup files that you would, maybe some data that you need to start up as well. And creating an emergency disk could save you lots and lots of headaches. Keep your original DOS disks so you can have those as a clean boot drive so you can start up.
Isn't it possible to have the computer automatically boot up and scan
Absolutely.
what you put in the computer?
Software, antivirus software is becoming very sophisticated, and we'll show you an example of a typical antivirus software in a little bit. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that this software does accommodate memory resident scanning, does accommodate boot track scanning, does accommodate hard disk scanning, and all on boot up, and all automatic, all in the autoexec with command lines. That's real important. Otherwise, you're going to forget about it. Everybody's busy. You're going to get in there. You need to get some work done. You need to get a printout out very quickly. You're going to get in there, turn the PC on, forget you have antivirus software, and just do your job. And not knowing you've inserted a disk that may be infected, may infect, you know, other files on the disk, and the trigger date is just waiting to happen. You know, a Michelangelo type thing, where March 6th is just waiting to happen, or a form boot track virus on February 18th, you know, just waiting to happen. That'll kick off on any of the 18th, any month, the 18th day of any month. So there are many triggers that can happen that you might not realize unless you have the software set up and configured to auto start when the computer is booted. And it doesn't necessarily have to go every day. Maybe once a week would be fine, depending on usage. So yeah, it's real important to have that thing resident and ready to go.
What are some of the more popular viruses?
Well, you know, I refer to as the top 10. There are, like I mentioned before, there are approximately 2,800 viruses in the environment, but there are really only about 50 live ones that people are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And of the 50, probably 10 are ones that we're seeing more often than not. Number one is still the form virus. It's a boot sector virus, and essentially it's not very malicious in nature, but it will cause, on the 18th of each month, key clicks. Your keyboard will go crazy. It ends up sounding like a machine gun. So it becomes very annoying, and ultimately you don't want to work with the program. Very infectious. You install, you know, you put a disk inside the drive bay, inside disk A, and you start the machine. The form virus gets on the boot track of the hard disk, resides in memory, and waits for the next diskette to be loaded. And it'll just sit on that boot track, and it's very infectious, and it'll just spread like crazy. That form virus pretty much makes up 43% of all the virus hits worldwide at this point. And that's a moving target. That changes. The New Zealand virus is very popular as well. That's the one where you'll see a message on the every 8th boot up, your PC is stoned. All right. So there are messages that you'll see. That's how you know if
Yes,
there's a virus out there.
As a college student, I ran into quite a few viruses myself
Yeah.
up at the campus, and one of them was a joint burning and saying
Okay.
that the computer was stoned. So
Yeah.
that must have been similar
That's-
to that.
Yeah, the New Zealand virus has many flavors, and that's the thing. With all of these viruses, they have strains associated with them. So you start with one virus, and then you may end up with many, many. And that's basically the where the trend. There's a trend to viruses, and essentially that's where it's going, because there are different types of viruses. There are stealth viruses that hide. You can't see them. They do linking. They're called companion viruses as well. And there's what they refer to as polymorphic viruses, which change. Today, you have a specific virus. When it infects another file, that virus changes. So now you have a brand new viruses. So you'll have different strains. You can have 30, 40,000 different iterations of the same virus. And that's what we're going to be dealing with.
Yes. And a lot of the students did lose their work because they didn't back up
That's right.
their
You know,
materials.
one of the things behind all of this, the underlying, I guess the underlying theme to all of this, you can have virus prevention measures everywhere in place, but you have to back up your work. But not only back up your work, you've got to have a clean backup. Because if the virus is on your hard disk and you're working off an infected hard disk, those files are going to be infected. Sure, you can back up those files.
They're still going to be infected.
They're still going to be infected, absolutely. Whether you go to disk backup, whether you go to tape backup, those are still infected files. So you have to use antivirus software, making sure that you start with a clean backup and you keep your software upgraded, the antivirus software. You have to keep it updated. Does nobody any good. If you put it on there, forget it. 6 months later, new strains come around and you're going to get hit.
Now,
So
what kind of software is available for scanning viruses?
There's many different kinds of software available. There's purely scanning software that will just look at a known set of signatures, and that signature is going to be checked against a database, and it just progresses along its files. It'll just look at all the files that are out there and just progress through the scan. And this is a very basic, rudimentary type of antivirus software, but it works. It works really good as long as you keep the signatures updated. There are checksumming software, antivirus software, which basically relies on calculations of a checksum of an executable. You have a certain file, and that executable file will be condensed into a code. And you have all these codes in a file. So the checksum will go through all of those files much, much quicker than if it had to read the entire file. Virus monitoring software, that's the TSR, terminate and stay resident component. It's very important because it sits in the background, sits in memory, and watches what's going on. There's inoculation software, virus removal software, and some of these we're very familiar with. The DOS delete command, that can be a virus removal software. You identify the virus and delete it, delete the file. You've just deleted that virus. If it's a boot track, you can use the sys command. Okay, sys :A or :C, and you're going to replace the command level, the hidden files on the boot track. Does the same thing. Still removes the file. It still removes the viruses from the file or the boot track. Then you have a classification called disinfection software, which essentially it's sort of dangerous, and there's risk involved with that. Many antivirus software will try to disinfect the software, disinfect the virus from the file, and in some cases you're trying to rewrite the file to its original state. That could be dangerous. Most virus experts will agree that the safest way is just get rid of the file. Just delete it. And so there's no remnants of that virus hanging around to haunt you later. Because you're going to actually get rid of the virus, but the program may no longer work the way it's intended because you stripped off something else. So, and everything we discussed, all of these types of virus softwares are usually incorporated in an antivirus software package, similar to what we've got here with IBM Antivirus. All of those components are usually built into the software. IBM Antivirus, Dr. Solomon's Antivirus Toolkit, FPROT, Sophos is Sweep, Norton Antivirus, Thunderbite Antivirus, ViSpy. Those are all good. You know, they've all got, you know, close to 100% accuracy, and they work. But you can take a look at any software out there, any antivirus software, and most of it's good nowadays.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get on the system and look at a real virus.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Hi, welcome back.
Well, John's got some software here. He's going to show us. What are you going to show us here, John?
This is IBM Antivirus, a very typical antivirus software. What is a little bit different about this one is that you're looking at it in Windows. Most of the antivirus software available is only available in DOS. But let me just run through some of the menu items, and then we'll insert this disk, which has some viruses, and you can see how this program interacts with it. Essentially, what we can do is, through this software, you can check diskettes, you can check the system, and in this you can see that there are many, many different options. This is essentially checking your hard disk or any part thereof. We'll move on from the checking a diskette or the hard disk to the setup. You can see that you can actually time this thing so it starts up every morning or once a week, etc. Save those settings. The shielding is an important part of this. This is the memory resident TSR that will protect you without you being aware of it. Log files are very important. You want to find out what's going on. If you get virus hits, you want to be cognizant of those logs. The help function is incredible with this program because you get the entire manual in the help file. It does take a little bit extra hard disk space, but it works really well. Full virus descriptions of everything that's available, all the viruses that are available. You can find out information about the viruses by just selecting them or searching for the virus itself. That becomes very, very effective when you do get viruses, to find out how bad they really are. Let's insert this diskette and check this disk out and see what we've got. So we're going to check the A drive and just tell it to execute. And we've got a couple viruses on here. First, it checks the computer's memory, and then it'll proceed to the actual diskette. This would be the same process for checking the hard disk, just take a lot longer. So we've got a file on here that I know is infected, and we've got a boot track that's also infected.
On that diskette, not on the system.
That's right.
Oh, good.
It's not going to allow it to be entered into the hard disk or into the computer's memory. When we initially installed the software, we set up a TSR to monitor the boot track of any diskette and to monitor virus activity in the computer's memory. So
Is this just going to beat forever now?
it's going to be for a little while. It's not forever.
Lovely.
The faster the system, I mean, this just comes right up on mine.
All right, so it's a slow system.
This is a 386, by the way.
Okay. 16 megahertz.
Yeah.
Well,
16 megahertz?
16 megahertz.
16
Give me a
megahertz.
break.
It works. Indications of a virus are found in your system, so it's letting you know. So you have an information screen. All right, so we're going to cancel out of this, and then it's just letting you know there's a boot record virus, and it's telling you to run the programs manually, and essentially it gives you more information here. You've got a boot record form virus right there, then the 1813, which is the Jerusalem class virus. You have a button here, disinfect, and so they say select all, and then OK to disinfect. And we get a system error.
Well, that always happens.
Because the diskette's right protected.
That's right, that's right. And that's a good point, too. So we can't fix it unless we write protect it. So it's letting you know that. So would you like to replace? Actually, we're not.
So you could, at this point here, if you had...
Eject it, or you can disable the write protection and continue. Actually, I'm going to do that because I want this thing fixed. So I'll retry. It's a good point, though. And it's actually repairing it at this point, replacing the boot track sector and repairing the infected file.
Well, great. Why don't we take a break now, go to the address, and we'll come back and wrap this baby up.
Oh, great.
If you have any questions or comments or suggestions,
Don't hesitate to write us.
don't hesitate to interrupt either.
Well, that's my job.
I know. You do it well.
Oh, thank
You
you.
do it well. If you have any questions about viruses, send them along. We'll be more than happy to try to get an answer for you. And we're going to bring you the address right now.
For PC Voyage Weekly on your local community access channel.
Welcome back. John, one of the things that we didn't mention that's a great way to avoid viruses is to, whenever you get a new diskette, protect it before you even put it in your system.
Absolutely.
I do that with all the commercial software that I buy, and this way here, no problems with it.
You're protected, yeah, right from the start. That's good. What I've got here, I mentioned earlier that there were some 2,800 viruses that people get infected with. This is just a partial listing that's applied within the IBM antivirus program. I'd just like to take a couple seconds here and start scrolling through just to give people an idea of what they are and how many there are.
We were just through the H's. And
Yeah, it's
amazing.
a bunch, and there's more every day.
well, what we need to do now is we need to thank you, John, for coming in.
Yes, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
very welcome.
And we need to break this up.
And we'll see you next time. I'm Diana McLean.
And I'm Rainey Laviolette.